think we'll get started now. So welcome everyone to the third session in our Channel Insight series. I'm Claudia Hebden, EMEA Channel Director at Keysight for Network Visibility and Testing, formerly ICSIA. If you have any questions throughout the session, please use the chat window and we'll answer them right at the end. I will now hand over to Andy Young, our Security Solutions Architect. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Claudia. Yes, welcome everyone. Thanks ever so much for your time. As Claudia says, yeah, I'm Andy Young, Security Solutions Architect at Keysight. My main role is supporting Threat Simulator, and what we're going to be talking about today is how you can go and hack yourself with our breach and attack simulation solution called Threat Simulator. The plan is to run through it as you see here. Firstly, we'll talk about the breach and attack simulation market. We'll talk about how we've addressed that with our solution, Threat Simulator. The next session, section, I wanted to go through the standard sort of messaging. So I want to give you a presentation, you know, a standard kind of presentation to get our messaging across. And then moving swiftly on to a demo. The demo should go through some use cases as well, but I've got a section on use cases just in case. We do have a free trial, so you are able to experience this yourselves. And finally, we'll go through some of the buying personas, because this solution targets certainly for a lot of guys, you know, a different persona to what they're normally used to. So without further ado, let's first talk about the SaaS security growth. SaaS security growth is pretty colossal, as I'm sure you'll probably all realize. And you know what we're talking about with that part of the market is around 25% annual growth. And you know, there's lots of reasons why, you know, this approach is very kind of popular, successful, etc. And you can see those listed here. And just in the way that, you know, by nature of the beast, it's easy to deploy, easy to use. Upgrades are, you know, easily managed, you know, centrally, and you know, a lot of the time the costs are driven down as a result. So it's a big market. Within there in red here, you can see that breach and attack simulation market has been defined as being even bigger growth. So this sits within the SaaS security growth, and you know, it's even larger, right? So there's a good reason to be addressing this market, I think. Breach and attack simulation was created, or rather defined by Gartner in 2017. So it's a relatively new kind of market. And as I say, we've obviously approached it in a certain way. We'll see what that looks like. We've created Threat Simulator, and the principle behind it is that, you know, we want you to be able to do this kind of assessments, or these kind of assessments with Threat Simulator very quickly and easily, and of course safely. And the concept is that, you know, you deploy agents. These agents are very lightweight, so they're Dockers. You sprinkle them around your network, hopefully one in every network segment that you have. And then because we are emulating all the bad stuff externally as well, it's a nice controlled environment, which is where the safety comes in. But also that allows us to, you know, emulate full kill chain. So we can emulate user behavior, people clicking on links, downloading malware, malware installing, lateral movement, all of these kind of good things we can emulate, and again, safely. So it does quite a few things. It enables you to kind of remediate as well. So you know, if there's any issues that an assessment will find, it doesn't just say there's a problem. It tells you exactly what the problem is, more specifically, it tells you for your specific security control how you can fix the issue. So let me go through the standard messaging with a sales presentation. I like to start off with this here. Now, the Verizon data breach investigation report obviously comes out every year. I think it's probably one of the best ones. I love some of the graphics in it, and this is my favorite one from 2020. The reason I think this is particularly useful is it gives us a bit of history. So the last 5 years this is showing us, and it shows us, you know, where the top kind of concerns or causes, in this case, of breaches. And you know, there's a couple of points to talk about here. Ransomware, it's kind of omnipresent. It sits hovering around the bottom there. We know it's an issue. The 2017 one was the WannaCry. Another interesting one is the phishing one. So this year it's at the top. It's in pole position, and you know, it's an interesting one because it's the only one that stayed in the top 3. So it's been on the podium for the last 5 years. But the one that's really interests me is the misconfiguration, and reason is, as you can see there, it's the only one that just continues to rise year on year. It plateaued a little bit for a couple of years, but it's on a march. And the last year it's got worse by around 5%. Now, you know, misconfigurations can be one of many things, of course. You know, it can be simply misconfiguring kind of online, you know, public storage and all that kind of stuff as well. But equally, you know, within there as well, of course, is misconfigurations of security controls. But either way, it's that human element, right? So, you know, whatever that misconfiguration is, you know, it needs addressing. Otherwise, it's going to get worse. I think, you know, if we have a look at why that might be, whenever I'm talking to prospects, I like to get an idea of how many security controls they have in their network. You know, one report that I read suggested up to 70 for some of the largest enterprises. The most common answer I get is 15 to 20, I would say. And you know, the Momentum Cyberscape, obviously there's thousands of logos in there, and I don't know what all of them do. I've got a good idea of them, of course, but and the challenge is, you know, the more security controls you have, security vendors in your network, well, potentially the more secure your network will be. But that's only if they're all working in harmony and they're configured correctly. And if they're not, you know, the more that you have in your network, the more chance that it's not going to work. So it's that fine balance. You know, you want more security, but you want what you already have to be working as efficiently as it possibly can first, I would suggest. Now, I think what is a really important point to understand is that I'm not suggesting that any of these vendors are bad or shouldn't be in your network or don't do the job. There's some extremely good vendors out there. You know, these vendors do a wonderful job, but only if they're configured right. And I'm showing you now the Gartner reports from earlier this year, and this suggests that 99% of firewall breaches all the way through to 2023 will be caused by misconfigurations, not firewall flaws. So wonderful devices out there if they're configured right. And I think some of the reasons why, you know, misconfiguration might come in is down to what we have today in the form of security assessments or testing. And in this particular case, you know, I've been involved in all of these to a larger or lesser degree. The pre-deployment one, and of course you can see that the x-axis is thoroughness, and we've got frequency. So it's comparing frequency with thoroughness, and you know, right up there with the the thoroughness is pre-deployment testing. I've done that for many years, and I think it's a wonderful thing to do, as are all of these methods of carrying out assessments. But because if you want to build out some infrastructure in a lab, make sure it's right sized, make sure that all the call flows are emulating real kind of layer 7 traffic and all the rest of it. That's a wonderful thing to do. And then throw in some security strikes and some DDoS attacks, and that's wonderful. You find an awful lot of problems when you do that, typically. But then comes the day you deploy it, and then you can't do that anymore. So yeah, brilliant thing to do. But in a live environment, no. Pen testing and red teaming, I mean, they're lumped together in one there. They're obviously different things, right? But as a general principle, well, with the red teams as well, I think the issue is really that from the research that we've done, around 98% of companies out there don't have the capability to red team is one issue, and that's why we want to kind of address it with Threat Simulator and make it easy to use. But pen testing and red teaming, it's higher risk. If you're sending malware through your network and you're targeting real servers and all that kind of stuff, that's maybe higher risk. But the idea is that one pen tester will get different results to another one, and I've seen companies have lots of pen testing providers lined up, and they cycle through them because one quarter they'll find something, the next quarter they get another team in, will find something else. So it's very manual, very time consuming, very expensive typically, but you're mandated to do it in some cases, so you should do it, and that's absolutely great. But wouldn't it be great if you could effectively, instead of being a point in time, run those kind of assessments on a daily basis? Now, you can run stuff on a daily basis with things like vulnerability assessments, and again, very useful. You want everything to be patched to the right level. Typically these will come out with great big thick reports, and you throw them over the wire to the server team and tell them stuff needs patching. How do you know they've been patched? Well, maybe you'll run it again in a week or so's time and find it's not. You can make it better by closing the loop with breach and attack simulation, and effectively that's why breach and attack simulation is in the top right there, because it fills a gap. It's very thorough, and you can run it as often as you want. You can run it every day, every hour if you wanted, I guess. And the idea is it's low risk. We'll discuss, or we'll see a little bit later on, why that is. But you can run these continuously in a production network, and somebody changes something. Like for example, when the work from home explosion happened earlier on this year, they reckon I think it was 65 or 68% of organizations had to make major changes to their security infrastructure to allow for that. And how do you know that environment is giving you as much protection as when your workers were kind of based in the corporate environment? So yeah, there's things happen, and unless you're doing this on a daily basis, you don't want to wait another 6 months to the next pen test team come in and find it. So some of the good things that come with this approach is that you can improve your security before purchasing new tools. Maybe you've had a big spend with security infrastructure. You need to justify it, and if it's justified, by identifying misconfigurations and gaps and all that kind of stuff, well then great. You can go out there and justify new spend. You can say this is configured. All that money we spent a couple of years ago is being used appropriately. We do have gaps, and we can prove it, and that you can emulate the whole kill chain. So in a live environment, that's a really useful thing to do. And And yeah, ultimately, I think another really useful feature, which I'll try and focus on in the demo, is the fact that we don't just tell you if you've got gaps and how to fix them. We also hook into your SIEM as well. So obviously, SIEM is the eyes and ears of the security teams. If that's not being alerted, that's just as bad as something, a security control not blocking in many ways. So we hook into that SIEM, and when we run assessments, we can say, this attack was or wasn't blocked, and if it was blocked, did it then alert your SIEM correctly? So they're all the kind of metrics you can get from an assessment. Now, one of the things that often comes up, when I'm talking to customers and prospects is, Keysight. Who's Keysight? Why Keysight? We've been around for many years. We've been leading the security testing sector for many years. In fact, at the heart of it all is our application threat intelligence team. These are a team of researchers who, they were set up in 2005, back in the breaking point days, and what they generate is this application threat intelligence, which can be consumed into a number of different solutions. Now, if we take the WannaCry example, we all know about that. It happened on Friday, May the 12th. Looking back before that, back in March, they released the patch. So Microsoft released the patch and didn't really give much information. They just said, you need to patch, it's serious. Then shadow brokers tools became available. They didn't come with instructions and all the rest of it. So our application threat intelligence team got hold of them, reversed engineered a few bits and pieces, and they were able to build what we call a strike 17 days before it actually went live or wild. And that gave 17 days for our customers to be able to emulate infection and stuff in a nice controlled environment, make sure that they could block it. And in fact, using our tools, it was the security vendors that were running these assessments to make sure that they could generate the signatures to detect it. So ultimately, pretty proactive, right? 17 days beforehand. And whilst what I would say is that Threat Simulator wasn't around in those days, but when WannaCry 3 comes out, wouldn't you want to be able to run this on a production environment and make sure you're safe before it actually hits? So with that, let me move on to the demo. So I'm going to run you a live demo. Before I do that, let me go through the demo environment that I'm going to be showing you here. So in this particular case, the demo environment that I have is running on Amazon AWS in a VPC, and it's emulating what a typical deployment would look like. And by that, what I mean is a typical deployment will be on a network that has lots of different network segments. So we've got a segment here that's running a demilitarized zone. We've got a segment here that we've called data center. We've got another one here called branch. And the idea is you deploy agents in all of those different network segments. Hopefully you've got security controls between those segments and protecting you from external. And in this case we've got a Palo Alto, we've got an Amazon WAF. We've got other security controls in there as well, but for the point of discussion, this is what we're going to be kind of looking at. So you've deployed your agents. You then have this concept of a dark cloud. The dark cloud is a similar principle to the agents, but they're hosted publicly, and they're emulating all the bad stuff. So maybe that's a command and control server. Maybe that's you know, a server dishing up malware or hackers trying to get into your network. So depending on the assessments that you're running, it will perform different functions. All of that is controlled by the management portal, which is essentially what I'm going to be showing you in a moment. So from the management portal, users can log on and decide, I'm going to run an assessment, and that assessment might be between the dark cloud and, you know, let's say an agent in the branch. And maybe that's seeing if some malware can get onto the branch agent and install itself. And you know, we're looking, because we know what we're sending and what we're receiving, we're looking to see, was that blocked? And we can tell that for that reason. So we can see if this agent was infected, and if it was, maybe it's going to try some lateral movement into another agent in a different network segment. And when it does, we're going to hope maybe that this IPS is going to protect the data center, because it's bad enough the branch get infected, that's not good, but you know, we want to limit the movement. So they're all the kind of scenarios that you can you know, assess, and all controlled by the management portal. The final piece in here is the SIEM agent. So you can deploy SIEM agents, and they will query your SIEM. You don't have to, you know, this is kind of optional. If you don't have a SIEM, it's fine. But if you do, then as well as working out whether, you know, your IPS was able to protect you, you know, did your SIEM actually alert you correctly to this attack? As I say, this is in AWS. These agents can be deployed, you know, in the cloud, maybe on Azure, on-prem, maybe you know, on a Linux box, maybe on a Windows machine running Hyper-V with a Linux box on it, whatever. And you know, another scenario then, just to expand on this a little bit, not part of my demo, but since I mentioned the work from home environment earlier, you know, we're able to, let's say, if the corporate decision was to deploy workers from home, and they were going to have a split VPN, you know, how do you know? How can you prove that these workers at home, maybe they've got a vulnerable browser, and maybe that browser, you know, when they're browsing, is going to have access to the open internet outside of your VPN, and maybe that's going to get infected. Maybe that's going to pivot and go through the VPN to the corporate network. So these are all kind of scenarios, just to make sure that, you know, do you, you know, these people that you've pushed home, are they being protected by the corporate security policies or not? So that's another kind of environment that's become important for us in the past couple of months. So on to the demo. So let me finish this slideshow. Let me show you what the dashboard looks like. So this is the graphical interface. So this is the web-based graphical interface that we saw in that diagram just a moment ago. What I'm showing you first is the dashboard. The dashboard is one of the tabs down the left-hand side here, and it gives us some good information. We can see there's a prevention score, which is an indicator of risk. Obviously, we want the prevention score to be as high as possible, and that would indicate lower risk. And we can see what that looks like over time. Bear in mind, this is a demo platform, so there will be some variations as people like myself play around with some assessments. But I think one thing I wanted to get across is that, you know, you don't have to live on this platform. In the early days when you first deploy, you might deploy it and find, you know, you're running a bunch of assessments that are getting through some security controls, and maybe, you know, you fixed those issues and you've reached a certain baseline, and you're in a good place now, and all you need to do is run continuously every day, and then just have a quick look to see if this prevention score has changed. Now, if the prevention score does change, we might want to glance down this screen and see if we've got some indicators of where the problem might be. If the problem was specific to an agent, or maybe it's specific to a particular assessment, that's something we can spot quite easily. If we have an issue with our cyber kill chain, some particular stage, then maybe we need to focus on that. Maybe we want to see if there's an issue with, prevention rather than detection. So this is the security control blocking and the SIEM alerting. If all of a sudden this the SIEM alerts aren't working, you would see that indicated here, and that's something we can go and focus on. There's lots of things for you to look at. Maybe it's a policy bypass that's an issue, and once you've worked out, there is a problem because the prevention scores change, and it looks like it's, I don't know, let's stick with the WannaCry theme. Let's say there's a problem with WannaCry. You can click on a link and start drilling down and seeing what the issue is. Now, recalling my talk through the network diagram, one of the things I spoke of was, maybe you've got an agent in the branch that becomes infected. They've maybe got a user on there that's clicked on a link, gone to a dodgy website, downloading malware, etc. So this is that kind of scenario with WannaCry. So all the different stages of the kill chain are here, and we can see that there's a lot of red because this attack has been allowed, which obviously is a bad thing, but it's affecting the branch. So the branch seems to have no protection. It's been infected. But then when the lateral movement is attempted from the branch to the data center, well, it's blocked, which obviously is a good thing. So we know the data center is protected, but the branch isn't. So that's something that's quite easy to spot. Going back to the dashboard, if we were to look at this one here, this one's the CISA top 10. So these are all the top 10 attacks split between client attacks and server attacks. We're looking at the client ones. So these are all the top attacks that have been exploited over the past 5 years. And again, we can see that this is run against the branch and the score is pretty bad. That's not good. It's been run against the data center as well, and the results are a lot better. So I can click now and start looking at a bit more details, because we could see here that some of these have been blocked and some haven't. Now, this assessment consists of 6 audits that have been run. They're all targeting different vulnerabilities, and we can see that we would expect to block all of them. That's quite reasonable, right? Because this is a top 10 compiled list, and you would expect maybe that's something that you want to make sure that you're protected against. So we want to block them ideally. What we can see in this column is not all of them have been blocked, some haven't. And if we look at the SIEM results, not all of them have alerted. There's one here that wasn't alerted. So it wasn't blocked by the firewall, it wasn't alerted, so that's maybe an issue. This one here, it looks like, well, it's been alerted to the SIEM, so maybe the security control saw it, but it just didn't block it, which could be a policy. So it could be that the policy on the IPS for this particular attack is to alert but not block. Now, if we look at the time frame along the top here, we can see that the results have changed over time. I've been playing around with it this morning, and what I do is I go onto my firewall, I make changes to the policy, and you can see that this is the default policy. Default policy doesn't block everything. It allows this one to go through. It allows this one to go through, and then I can go through and maybe put in a strict policy. I might naturally assume that if I apply a strict policy, that's going to fix the problem. So I apply the strict policy. It doesn't stop this one here. So maybe I need to do something else. So maybe I need to go into here and I need to look at the recommendations. So this means that, you know, when I run this assessment between the data center and the dark cloud, between it, I have my Palo Alto IPS. And because it knows it's a Palo Alto IPS, it's going to give me specific recommendations for a Palo Alto IPS. So it's going to say, you know what, if you want to fix this, you've got external references. You can go to the Palo support site, but ultimately you need to apply this signature here. And you know, I've done that previously. I go in and I create my own strict policy, and I can block it, right? So, per my point earlier, these are extremely capable devices. If you want stuff blocked, you know, it's not difficult. You can do that. It's not difficult because you're doing it with Threat Simulator. But try running 1,000 audits and making sure you block all of those with signatures. It's not so easy without Threat Simulator, right? It's a lot of manual work and very time consuming. This is very quick and easy to do that. So now, let's say I've worked out that, you know, I want to make sure I can block all of these. I've gone through, I've applied the recommendations, I've got to the stage where I know it's blocking, I know it's alerting. Now I'm just going to run it every day. And then every day I should get the same results. And if I don't, something's changed, I can drill down and find the issue. I know some of you guys will probably be maybe a little bit more technical. And I'm just going to briefly touch on the point that, you know, if you wanted to, you can kind of drill down and look at the messages going into the SIEM, and you can see, you know, how we queried the SIEM and how the Palo was saying, yes, I see this as a threat, and I see this as threat 49891. So this gives you, you know, the confidence to know that this is a live system. This is real communications. This is us actually generating live attacks that are seen by, you know, a live firewall and alerting a SIEM. So that's the demo done with. There's other stuff to show you, but I think that should hopefully give you an idea of what it looks like and how we approach breach and attack simulation. Let me go back now to my presentation, and we'll go to the next section. So I'm just going to quickly page through that. So there is the option to have a free trial, and the reason I'm explaining this is actually there are 3 deployments, and the reason for that is that if you have end customers, they have a deployment that they can go on, and they have 5 agents for 2 weeks. Internally, we've got a system that we use, and for partners, we give you access to this particular one here, which means that you've got less restrictions on the licensing. So, you know, we want you to be able to you know, maybe build your own demo environments like you've just seen here, and you know, not have to keep kind of getting it timed out. So that's the principle behind that. So if you want free trial, that's entirely possible. In terms of the use cases, I can see that time is cracking on, so I will probably skip through these at some speed. because basically I think I've probably covered off some of these in the demo. And so in this particular case, this is where we're running assessments and we're finding issues. We're finding assessments that aren't passing, they're failing, and then we're giving you recommendations that you can apply to your security control. Again, if you've got policy exceptions, that's the kind of scenario there. In the case of malware detection, this diagram here, this ladder diagram, is something that we provide through the portal. So if you're interested in running a particular assessment, well, that assessment will have a ladder diagram on it, and you can see that this will, you've got two different agents here, and you've got all the dark cloud agents sitting out there. So this is highlighting how a dark cloud agent can maybe try and get an exploit through to one agent, and this is the call flow that emulates kind of infection, and then this is the lateral movement trying to move across to the other Keysight internal agent. Probably worth spending a little bit of time on is the buying personas. So we've done a lot of research. Traditionally, Keysight hasn't produced products that would be consumed by SecOps teams. Certainly Threat Simulator does, so it's worth commenting on that. Ideally, the kind of people that are going to want Threat Simulator are, well, as I touched on earlier, we're hoping it's going to be the 98% of companies that don't have in-house red teaming, ideally, of course. Now, the size of organization, we think is between 1,000 and 10,000. We certainly fit outside that boundary as well, so don't let that be a kind of a hard cap for you. If you think an organization is bigger than 10,000, we've got customers like that. But generally it's between 1,000 and 10,000. Whether they have a red team or not is kind of a little bit irrelevant to a degree, because ultimately, you don't want your red teaming to be doing these kind of assessments on a daily basis. They can't. So it does complement them anyway. But in general, we're targeting personas who sit within the SecOps environment. Now, in a SecOps environment, typically they're administered via a SOC. So in reality, anyone who's got a kind of connection, in a SOC, whether it's someone who's overseeing it, maybe a CISO, or whether it's a SOC manager, or even the various different analysts that sit within the SOC. These are the kind of people that we want to be targeting. Whether it's the guys on the coalface who are configuring the firewalls, or whether it's the CISO that can kind of see the value of running these kind of assessments and being able to, justify spend and all that kind of good stuff as well. So in general, those buying personas are within the SOC or kind of the SecOps environment. I've got a little piece on the personas here. I think in reality, we probably all know, who the CISO is in an environment. Not everyone has one though, and so you could be having to talk to, depending on the size of organization, maybe a CIO or CSO, but ultimately board level, C-level staff that have to justify spend, make decisions, and put them up to the board. The next level down would be security managers, so that could be someone who manages the SOC. The guys that come up with, the day-to-day running of SOCs, the guys that, come up with the processes and stuff on a daily basis, the hiring and firing and stuff. And then the guys that work for them may be people who, the coalface workers, maybe they're security engineers, architects, SIEM engineers. Again, these are the guys that, and security analysts as well in there. So all the guys that maybe work on the coalface at different levels to configure. So yeah, if you get the opportunity to talk to a CISO or a SIEM engineer, they're all the kind of things that should alert you to to the opportunity of maybe talking to them about Threat Simulator. I've got some discovery questions. Maybe it's probably best to talk about giving you this afterwards. Maybe we can pop these across to you afterwards rather than going through them verbatim now. But if you get questions around the human challenge, the layer 8 challenge, and all the misconfiguration stuff, that's there's some good kind of leading questions there. Maybe you're talking to someone who's expressing problems about working from home and all that kind of stuff. There's some good questions there to lead with. If you're talking maybe to some of the managers in there about how they can kind of report and justify spend, etc., all that kind of stuff. So that's there for you. If the policy is to send you out the whole presentation, great. If not, we can certainly send you this slide afterwards. So I was aiming at having a few minutes of questions. So at this stage, I think probably I'll hand back to Claudia. Maybe Claudia, if you've got some questions that you've seen come in, or maybe we can open it up to all of the attendees and have some questions come in over audio.
Yeah, so if anyone's got any questions, please use the chat window. I was waiting for them to come through to me, Andy.
Cool, okay. Yeah, so feel free to put them in your chat window then.
And regarding the presentation, we will be sending this out to everyone as well, so you'll have those, and as well as the other slides you went through.
Perfect, okay, good. Now I've left plenty of time for questions. There's not going to be any, is there?
No. So yeah, I've got some questions coming through. How many audits are currently included in Threat Simulator?
We do regular updates. Maybe I'll take you back. Maybe just let me end this show and I'll take you back to here. So in terms of the audits, we would call those assessments. So essentially what happens is you have assessments, and these assessments get assigned to agents and then become scenarios. So of all of the assessments that we have, you can assign them to however many agents you want, run them as often as you want, and to have as many different scenarios as you want. But the individual assessments, you can see there's a couple of thousand in there. We kind of categorize them. So, if you felt that, you've got a web application firewall, this is a very good use case, because, certainly in our experience in the demo platform, when we've been running assessments, we've found that, you can deploy all the different rule sets that come with various different cloud-based WAFs, and it doesn't give you anywhere near the protection you would probably think. So in that case, you'd probably want to run all of the web application security ones. And so we bundle them together in to make them useful for use cases. So we put all of the, in this case, web application security ones here. If you want to drill down, if you was interested in the, the Honda one, the RSnake, payloads and stuff, you can do that down here. There's 138 of them, and if you want more details, you can click on them here and see what they look like. And so you can run kind of whole groups of assessments, or you can run them individually. You can start drilling down and looking at different, particular ones. So yeah, we've got thousands. We categorize them. If you want to look at URL filtering, if you want to look at remote access, cross-site scripting, data exfiltration, we separate them like that to make it nice and easy. But ultimately, you have access to all of them, and at the moment, it's a couple of thousand. We do regular updates to these as well. So when the application threat intelligence team have updates, they'll push them to the product here.
And you answer the next question then, how often do new audits get released? And another one related to that is, how long does it take from time a new attack goes public to the time this attack is included into Threat Simulator?
Okay, so we have regular updates scheduled for bi-weekly. That should increase to weekly. And you know, in the special cases, so for example, if we go back to that WannaCry example, you know, that was a special use case that was extremely important for lots of our customers, and that was done as a special effort, and that went out you know, in its own little release as well. And that's the principle here. So we'll get individual releases coming out if something really important comes out, and they've been able to emulate it and push it out as an audit. That will happen straight away. I'm not sure as I can give you any kind of guarantees on time frames, is the honest answer, and I think it probably will vary accordingly. But you know, there will be, you know, individual ones being pushed out there. Hopefully we won't see them very often, because that would be an indication of something, you know, quite serious going on out there. But by default, they go out every couple of weeks.
Okay, and next question is, what are the total number of vendors support for such integration with Keysight?
Okay, so again, you know, this solution was released back in RSA, which I think was the last in-person event to ever happen on this planet. And
I think you're right on that one.
yeah, so it's a relatively new product. Sorry, I've just gone and forgot the question. Sorry about this.
Total numbers of vendors we support.
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, so in terms of support, what it comes down to is support of what? So if we first talk about the security controls that sit in between, you know, we've got support for a number of security controls. And if you want to add one, you can see the drop-down list here. There's a number of vendors that you can have here, you know, even kind of generic ones like Snort. So if you have a Snort rule, you know, there are lots of different vendors that can ingest those even. So so there's a fairly wide range of security controls that we can integrate with. The other side to that question I would suggest is on the SIEM. So with the SIEM support, the way that it basically works is probably best described with this diagram here. So, you know, we have SIEM agents that talk to your SIEM, and your SIEM is either acting, you know, as a SIEM and syslog server, or you can separate the two. So that's how it kind of fits together. So support for that, at the moment, we have support for Splunk and QRadar. Now we're doing this based on demand. If a customer comes to us and says, you know, it's really important that we have, you know, another SIEM vendor, then we will prioritize that and do that. It's not necessarily, you know, that tricky to do, so it shouldn't take too much time. It's just at the moment we're seeing all the demand with either Splunk or QRadar. If you're seeing other and there's, you know, an opportunity there, let us know. We can prioritize it and change that. So support for different vendors, I would differentiate between SIEM support and kind of security controls at the moment.
Next one, can a mapping of the findings be made to the MITRE attack?
Yes. So I probably didn't major on it earlier, but let me show you. So in the case of, I showed you the CISA top 10. So when we were looking at the results for this, I'll just open that up again. We do map to the various different techniques. In this case, these are all drive-by, so this is T1189. So we do map to them. We give you other external references as well. And if you do drill down and look at recommendations as well and want to look at audit overviews and that kind of stuff, we do give those mappings down here as well. So there's the MITRE attack ID there. So this is a drive-by compromise, and we give you the link to it. And we also have those mappings on the assessments as well, so you can see them on the assessments before you actually run it as well. So yes.
Great. And you almost touched on it there. So how Keysight getting such intelligence to apply the recommendation from all different vendors?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, and I think it's I think the first thing to cover there is that shows the value, right? Because what you actually want is all the targeted recommendations for your specific security controls. So that application threat intelligence team alongside the engineering team will actually test those on all the different security vendors to make sure that when we run an assessment, what it maps to in terms of their security signatures and how to apply them. So they will actually do that research, make sure that you apply that signature and it does actually block. So yeah, that's they do it. I guess really there's no real kind of quick fix for that, really. It's I guess there's an element of automation that can be done, but yeah, that's kind of the value of having those targeted recommendations.
Okay. Next one. Ideally, where should the agent be deployed in the environment to have complete coverage of the environment?
Right, we're getting all the good questions. So I would say that if I go back to my network diagram, if I can find it. Where's my diagram? There we are. So, in principle, it should work such that you want to have agents that are sitting behind every security control that you have, and if that's a different network segment, then the ideal scenario is to deploy agents in every network segment. They don't have to sit on every server. So in the data center, you've got 50 servers. You don't have to deploy agents on each and every one of those. These can just be sitting on a standalone machine or a standalone virtual machine alongside all of those other servers. As long as it's sitting behind the same security control, it's going to assess that for you. So in general principle is to have agents in each different network segment.
Okay, I'm sure you're going to like the next question, Andy. What differentiates Threat Simulator from its competitors like Simulate, Attack IQ, XM Cyber?
Yeah, I think if we were to go back to my first slide, it's a big market. Breach and attack simulation. There's lots of people interested in addressing that market as well, and all those vendors have done that. We're all doing it slightly differently, of course. I think by a long way we are the easiest to deploy. So having lightweight Docker agents makes us very easy to deploy. I think having those recommendations are is a really good advantage. So I think having the ability to deploy very quickly, and when I say quickly, I mean that you know, some of the vendors out there will take weeks to get this deployed. You can literally be up and running from scratch in 5 minutes running assessments. Now, you know, that's quite a stark difference, but I think it's very important that we can do that, you know, with a lot of ease, right? I think deploying is very important. I think safety is important. I guess one thing, if you're familiar with those other vendors, is you'll probably notice that they have endpoints as well. So we have a release imminent for endpoints and email support as well. So, you know, we're not just sitting still, we're on a charge at the moment, and, you know, that functionality will be coming to Threat Simulator very soon. But we've initially addressed the market with our, you know, the kind of network detection, so running through security controls with network agents as opposed to endpoints.
And related one, do you have a comparison doc to assist us in the BAS market or a Gartner report?
There isn't a Gartner report as yet, as in, you know, they haven't done the Magic Quadrant and all the rest of it. So that's not really available at the moment. I think, you know, the challenge with that approach anyway, in such a fresh new sector, is, you know, there's lots of movement. You know, if you asked me a couple of months ago what functionality do you have, you know, I'd have said something completely different to what I'm telling you today, and that will be the case in another month or two's time, right? So it's very quick and a very quick moving environment. So those kind of assessments aren't always useful, but there aren't any as yet anyway. So
okay, I've got a few more questions if you've got time to quickly do them, Andy.
yeah, yeah, we're getting close to the time, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, do you have playbooks to work with purple teams, and how would that add value to their processes?
We don't at the moment. I think, you know, I think, you know, that is a very valuable use case. We do have people that have looked at this and said, well, that's great, because, you know, I can actually kind of use it as, you know, like in a training environment as well. So yeah, I think it's that is a good use case, but no, we don't have any kind of books for that yet. You know, maybe that's something that we can take a look at. If you know, if you feel that's some really good use case that has extremely good value, and you can take that to the market, then, you know, I'm sure, you know, we will listen to that and act on it. Yeah.
Last one, what is the baseline maturity of the customer? I presume having a SIEM is a minimum requirement.
Oh, so I would say no, it's not a minimum requirement. You don't actually have to have a SIEM to get value. You know, yes, when we run an assessment, you can see if you're preventing and you can see if you're detecting. But if you don't have a SIEM agent, it doesn't matter. You know, if your focus is making sure that you're preventing, that's great. Just, you can do that. So SIEM isn't a requirement. I think it's a good indicator that, you know, maybe you're talking to someone who's in a SOC and, you know, they've got a nice mature stage of their security posture and stuff, and that's great. But equally, you know, we've got I've had some really interesting conversations in the past couple of days with, you know, guys in organizations of a reasonable size that consist of one guy, a security guy. I spoke to one yesterday where there's two of them and they don't have a SIEM yet. You know, their first step is to want to make sure that they're secure, you know, before going on to the next stage. So that's, you know, so no, that's a long way of saying no, it's not a prerequisite. Maturity of a security team does come, does play a part, and maybe they're slightly different conversations you're having, but ultimately it's not a deciding factor either way.
Brilliant. Well, we're at the top of the hour now, so just a quick couple of reminders to go back to your slide deck. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Let me just go through these.
So just a brief reminder, we have a lot of resources available on Threat Simulator, and that's on our partner portal, so you can see there everything that's available. Got lots of presentations and also links to both the trials for partners and also customers, and there's a campaign in the box as well. And if you flip to the next slide. And just a reminder, we have our 4th session tomorrow, which is on network monitoring to ensure cybersecurity and application performance for operational technology. So that's at a slightly different time tomorrow. It's later in the afternoon at 3 p.m. CEST. That's due to Eric Floyd, who's the Director of Business Development for that Solutions, and obviously he's based in the US. So hopefully you can join us tomorrow. Thank you for attending today. Andy, thank you for hosting this. It was really informative.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
you.